I never thought a janitor's voice could shatter my CEO's warning about my son's future. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. It started with my heart pounding, my palms sweaty, standing outside the sleek office doors of my boss, a cold dread settling in my stomach. The golden letters on the glass towered over me like a judgmental god. Inside, I could hear muffled voices, the authority they held chilling me to the bone. I was terrified. My son Ethan, only 8, was struggling in school. The words echoed in my head. Your son might be a lost cause, the CEO had warned, his voice heavy. The prospect of his future dimmed as bleak as a stormy night. The air felt thick, suffocating. Then the door creaked open and I saw him, the janitor. A weary man in a faded uniform, his hair grizzled, eyes carrying stories no one could tell. There was something about him, a spark of defiance in his demeanor. He stepped into my line of sight, the wheels on his cart squeaking like an unexpected visitor. I felt the world freeze for a moment. I barely knew his name, but the urgency in his silence made my heart race faster. He locked eyes with me almost like he knew my pain. The hum of the office faded, replaced by the frantic beating of my own heart. Don't let them crush his spirit, he said, his voice low but steady, like thick smoke curling through the air. You have to fight for him. My breath caught in my throat. How could he disrupt such a powerful moment? The audacity, the heart of this janitor had sparked something in me. Excuse me? I murmured, bewildered, my chest tightening. He nodded earnestly. Your son doesn't have to succumb to their labels. Just then the CEO's voice boomed from the office. This isn't negotiable. The walls felt like they were closing in. My mind raced. Was this janitor right? Could I really stand up to them? As his words sunk in, silence enveloped us. I could hear my own heartbeat, as if it was the only sound left in the world. The janitor took a step closer, a glimmer of hope dancing in his eyes. Believe in him. Believe in the fight, he whispered. And then before I could respond, he vanished down the corridor. Like smoke in the wind. My mind was a flurry. What did he know? What did I need to do? The weight of the inevitable loomed, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. Would I really risk everything for my son? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The following days were a blur of gray. Each morning began with the heavy weight of the CEO's words, echoing through my mind like a relentless haunting. I dropped Ethan off at school with a forced smile, my heart sinking as I watched him blend into the crowd of children, each one a flicker of innocence and possibility. But Ethan seemed different. He shuffled along, head down, as if he carried the invisibility of a ghost, his small hands clutching his worn-out backpack like a lifeline. I had fought to keep my composure at work, pouring myself into spreadsheets and meetings, trying to forget the troubling thoughts swirling around my head. But then came that day, the day I found myself standing in front of Ethan's school, staring at the brick facade that had become a fortress of disillusionment. I felt the weight of my decision pressing down on me. Could I actually challenge the authority that loomed like a dark cloud over my son's future? Doubt gnawed at me, a relentless presence. Just as I was about to turn away, the faint sound of laughter drifted through the open window, a melody so pure it warmed my heart. I turned instinctively, and my gaze landed on a group of children, Ethan amongst them, his laughter a bright spark against the gray backdrop of my thoughts. But then I saw it, teasing. A few kids pointed, laughter turning to mockery, Ethan's smile fading into confusion and hurt. It was all too familiar, the sting of rejection and isolation. I felt a surge of anger and helplessness, a tempest brewing within me. Would he always be the target? In that moment something shifted. I remembered the janitor's words, that quiet strength embedded in his simple plea. I took a deep breath and decided to speak to Ethan's teacher. It was time to act. I wouldn't let the shadows of despair claim my son. Inside the classroom, I was met with the polite yet cold demeanor of Mrs. Wilkins, who seemed more interested in maintaining the status quo than addressing Ethan's struggles. I stood firm, recounting the moments I had witnessed outside, detailing Ethan's heartbreak. But as I spoke, I sensed a wall building a defensive barrier protecting what she deemed her authoritative domain. Every child learns differently, she replied, her tone clipped and dismissive. Labeling him want help. He needs to adapt just like everyone else. My heart broke at her words, the truth of them suffocating. Yet within me flickered a spark ignited by the janitor's unwavering faith. He doesn't need to adapt to be someone he isn't, I responded, fighting the quiver in my voice. He needs support to discover who he is. Her gaze softened, if only for a second, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe my words resonated deeper than I anticipated. Yet, as I left the school that day, the hope was quickly eclipsed by a sense of dread. Moments later, my phone buzzed, shattering the fragile calm I had managed to create. The name on the screen sent a chill through me. It was the CEO, requesting an immediate meeting. My heartbeat surged. Was this about the conversation at the corporate office? Had my challenge to the status quo ignited a fire that would bring me crashing down? As I sat in my car, anxiety gnawed at my insides. I wrestled with panic, recalling the janitor's reminder to fight. But here I was on the precipice of another challenge, teetering between anger and fear. I drove to the office, the weight of my responsibilities pressing heavier than before. Just as I approached the building, I noticed a patch of flowers blooming against the concrete, a vibrant splash of color amidst all the gray. They stood defiantly, a reminder that beauty could rise even in the harshest of environments. I stepped out of my car, inhaling the fragrant air, grounding myself as I tried to channel that unforeseen courage. As I walked inside, the receptionist eyed me, uncertain, and the weight of uncertainty settled deep once again. And then, just as I was about to make my way to the CEO's office, a hand landed gently on my shoulder. I turned, startled to find the janitor standing behind me, his face an inscrutable mask of calm. "You're not alone," he said, a warmth radiating from him that felt like a soft blanket over my frayed nerves. Sometimes a fight is what it takes to create a change. Before I could respond, he glanced towards the office doors and then back at me, something brewing in his eyes. But sometimes you have to be ready for unexpected consequences. I swallowed hard, a knot tightening in my throat. "What do you mean?" But his glance turned serious, and before he could say another word, a flurry of voices erupted from the CEO's office. The doors swung open, and I caught a glimpse of chaos unfolding inside. Words like termination and failure cracked through the air, slicing through the tension like a knife. Suddenly, I realized this moment was more than just an exchange of power. It was a turning point, one where my decisions might not only impact Ethan's future but mine as well. And as the janitor stepped back, I faced the door, the echoes of laughter from outside muffling the storm inside. I took a deep breath, my heart racing, ready to step inside the fray, unaware of how the next few moments might change everything. The room was a cacophony of voices, and as I stepped through the threshold of the CEO's office, the tension folded around me like a heavy cloak. The glaring lights above seemed to magnify every line of stress etched on the faces of my colleagues. They all turned towards me, a silent acknowledgement of the storm that had just entered the room. "Janet, just in time," the CEO said, his voice smooth yet laced with an undercurrent of frustration. "We were discussing the recent developments in your project." The words pierced through me like darts, each one a reminder of my precarious position. I noticed a few heads turn subtly. Their expressions morphed into a mixture of pity and apprehension. It was as if they all understood that the outcome of this meeting hinged not just on business but on something far more profound. The moral choices we were faced with regarding Ethan. "Thank you. But if I may," I exhaled, finding the courage surged within me like a tidal wave. "I understand there are projects at stake, but I need to address something more personal. My son's well-being." Gasps cascaded through the room, and the CEO raised an eyebrow, caught off guard. "Personal matters should remain separate from business discussions." "Janet, that may be," I replied, feeling the ground shift beneath me. "But when a personal matter affects a child's future, it becomes my business. We're all aware of the pressure in this company, our lives, our families all intertwined." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of every gaze, the collective doubt and fear hanging in the air. Would they side with the CEO's rigid mindset, or would they see the heart behind my words? "Personal opinions cannot dictate corporate strategy," the CEO stated, his voice icy and unwavering. We must deliver results and frankly, you are too emotionally invested to make clear decisions. A sharp sting cut through my resolve, and yet the janitor's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes you have to be ready for unexpected consequences. Perhaps this was one of those moments that if caring about a child's well-being is a hindrance to productivity, then perhaps I have a bigger issue with this company's values, I said, the statement explosive reverberating across the walls. The room fell into deeper silence, the air thick with the unsaid. The voices that had once been whispering about my impending failure were now hushed, watching like witnesses at a trial. It was painfully clear that the CEO was caught off guard. I had stepped into dangerous territory, and I could almost hear the stakes rising. Then came a small spark of flicker of unexpected kindness from an unlikely source. Melissa, a colleague from accounting, stepped forward, her voice unwavering. I agree with Janet. We need to foster an understanding environment if we want to generate real growth. A corporate style that disregards personal struggles isn't sustainable. I felt my heart lift a little, buoyed by her support. I needed that connection, that affirmation that not everyone was willing to submit to a doctrine devoid of humanity. But as her words hung in the air, the CEO's face twisted into a mask of indignation. Are you questioning my leadership? He snapped, his tone fierce, transforming what should have been a moment of solidarity into a deliberate attack. Before Melissa could reply, he turned back to me, his eyes cold, a warning lurking beneath. And let me remind you, challenging authority has consequences, Janet. There should be no illusion of safety here. Are you prepared to lose your position? Over your son? The threat crackled like static between us, chilling the air. My heart dropped and doubt crept back in, clawing at my determination. Was I truly willing to risk everything? The words rolled around my brain, too potent to ignore. In that moment, a part of me wanted to retreat, to protect what little I had left and remain silent. But as I stood there, feeling the weight of each pair of eyes on me, I imagined Ethan, tucked away in his classroom, feeling lost and bullied, waiting for someone to stand up for him, waiting for me. And prepared to fight for what's right, even if it means losing everything, I declared, my voice gaining strength. What's at stake here is bigger than any job. It's about dignity, acceptance, and showing our children they mattered. As the words left my lips, a hush enveloped the room, punctuated only by the faint buzzing of phones and the far-off laughter of children playing outside. I could see my colleagues beginning to shift uncomfortably, caught in the crossfire of my conviction and the CEO's looming presence. It was then that my fate, like a delicate flower blossoming through the cracks of concrete, teetered on the edge of transformation. Let me make this clear, the CEO said, his voice low and dangerous. You're walking a fine line, Janet. Impressive speeches don't pay the bills. We'll see how this plays out. But don't say I didn't warn you. As he dismissed me with an icy wave of his hand, I felt both liberated and terrified. I had leaned in fully, exposing my heart like a tender wound, but I had also laid a foundation for a battle not just for Ethan, but for every child who ever felt invisible. When I stepped outside the building, the sun blazed down, igniting the horizon with streaks of gold. For a moment I felt a sense of clarity and purpose, a glimpse of sunflowers thriving in a field of gray. But a buzz slipped through my fingers as I received a text, a single line that sent a chill down my spine. Is Ethan okay? I heard some kids talking. It sounded serious. My heart raced. The shadows of uncertainty loomed larger than ever. What had I unleashed by deciding to challenge authority? My son would now face the repercussions of my choice, and I hadn't even prepared him for it. I took a deep breath, feeling the flutter of panic rise, and plunged into the chaos of the unknown once more, ready to uncover the truth yet terrified of the consequences it might bring. The wind whipped around me as I stepped away from the office building, my heart pounding against the confines of my chest. The irony of seeking clarity amidst chaos struck me. How had it escalated to this point? My fight for Ethan, a simple plea for understanding, had felt profound moments ago, but now it only amplified my fears. I clutched my phone tightly, the screen holding the weight of that single text message. My fingers trembled slightly as I reread the words. I had become the catalyst for the storm, and like a mother bear, I wanted to retaliate against anything that threatened my cub. Yet I was walking on a tightrope between hope and despair, and the fall seemed imminent. Get it together, Janet, I murmured to myself, forcing my eyes to scan the bustling street ahead. I needed to get to Ethan before the darkness crept in deeper, before whispers in the halls could penetrate his vulnerable heart. The ride home felt interminable, the world outside painting a blur of gray as my mind raced with possibilities. Each car that sped past served as a reminder of the speed at which my life was spiraling. I thought of Ethan's bright, curious smile and the way it could light up the room. How could it be at risk from rumors and reckless words? That light was worth fighting for. I arrived at our modest apartment, the door creaking open to a familiar warmth. The scent of leftover spaghetti hung in the air, a piece of simple comfort in an otherwise tumultuous day. As I set my bag down, the chatter from the television enveloped me, filling the silence that threatened to close in. Ethan? I called, my voice a mix of reassurance and trepidation. And here, Mom, he shouted from the living room, a note of cheerfulness cutting through my building anxiety. I rounded the corner, and there he sat, knees tucked beneath him, eyes fixated on a cartoon. For a brief moment, I could convince myself everything was okay. He looked so at ease, untouched by the world outside. But then, as if sensing my unease, he glanced up and gave me a smile that faltered as he noticed my expression. Is everything all right? He asked, his innocence piercing my heart like an arrow. Just a long day, kiddo, I replied, trying to sound upbeat. How was school? He shrugged, returning to his show, but something shifted in his demeanor, an awareness that he was somehow attuned to my unsteady emotions. Mom, are you sure you're okay? I knelt beside him, my heart swelling with love and fear. He was perceptive, more than I realized, often reading my moods better than I could manage my own. I'm fine, really. I'm just working on a grown-up thing. You know how it goes. Is it about the kids that pick on me? He asked, turning serious, the light in his eyes dimming. I felt my insides twist, the sharpness of truth cutting through. Ethan, I hesitated. I didn't want to burden him with adult problems, but I also needed him to know he wasn't alone. I'm trying to make things better for you, I promised. He looked at me for a moment, his young face shifting into a frown. I heard the boys in gym class talking about you, Mom, that you might lose your job. Are they going to hurt you? He sounded so small. No, sweetheart. That's not how it works, I hurried to assure him, but I caught a glimpse of my own anxiety reflected in his face. Listen, some days are just hard, but we're going to be okay. We have each other, and that's what matters. It was a line I repeated often, and at that moment I prayed it rang true. Just as I thought the moment might ease, the air filled with the gentle rustle of Realisha knock echoed from the front door. Who could that be? I mumbled, eyes darting toward Ethan. Stay here. As I cautiously approached the door, my stomach churned with apprehension. I opened it to find a solemn figure standing there, Melissa from the office. She looked different outside of the corporate environment, her usually pristine attire replaced by a comfortable sweater and a warmth in her eyes. Hi, Janet. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said softly, glancing over my shoulder to get a glimpse of Ethan, who was diligently focusing on his show. No. Come in. Is everything all right? I asked, my voice uncertain. I just wanted to check on you after today. Her sincerity wrapped around me like an embrace. You were so brave standing up in there. I didn't want you to feel alone. Her presence felt like a shift in the wind, a subtle metamorphosis that brought with it an unexpected light. Thank you, I said, tears brimming as I gestured for her to sit at our kitchen table. I didn't expect anyone to care. Maybe that's part of the problem, she replied, sitting down. We often think we have to bear this weight alone. But that's not true, Janet. We're in this together. Just then, Ethan walked up, curiosity mingling with caution. Who's that, Mom? This is Melissa, a friend from work, I introduced, marveling at how easily kindness could bridge the gap between strangers. Hi, Ethan. She greeted, a bright smile illuminating her face. I've heard so much about you. He hesitated, glancing back and forth between us, but then offered a tentative wave before retreating back to his cartoon. As I settled into the conversation with Melissa, discussing the earlier meeting and navigating the complexities I was facing, I felt a thread of hope woven through the fabric of despair. The walls around me didn't feel as confining. Perhaps standing against adversity wasn't about solitude but about finding allies willing to push back. But suddenly, my phone buzzed, a startling reminder that clarity was fleeting. The message jerked me back to reality. There's more to Ethan's situation than you realize. Meet me at the park tonight. You need to know it. I felt a cold shiver dance down my spine, the weight of uncertainty pressing back in. Panic crept in as I managed to say goodbye to Melissa, wrapping up our conversation, realizing this newfound connection might only lead me deeper into treacherous waters. As she stepped out, I squeezed her hand and whispered my gratitude, feeling her warmth linger even as the door clicked shut behind her. But I was left alone with the fearful certainty that the rest of my day, all of my choices, would unfold in ways I couldn't begin to predict. With Ethan happily immersed in his show, I stole a moment to breathe deeply. I knew I had to go to that meeting in the park. But the shadows were long, and I could only hope I was ready for the revelations waiting for me in the dark. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the window. I could hear the distant sounds of laughter from the children playing outside, a world untainted by the fears that clung to me. Ethan was still engrossed in his cartoon, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just outside our doorstep. I glanced at the clock. Time was slipping away. "Hey buddy," I called over to him, trying to muster a lightness I didn't feel. "How about we make some popcorn and have a movie night later?" He perked up, eyes sparkling like stars. "Can we watch that dinosaur one again?" "Absolutely. Your favorite," I said, forcing a smile. I wanted this normalcy for him, a shield against the chaos I couldn't protect him from. As I prepped the popcorn, the message loomed over me like an impending thunderstorm. You need to know. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever awaited me tonight could change everything for Ethan. With the final kernels popping, I wrestled with my thoughts. Should I confide in Ethan? Shield him from whatever was waiting? The line between protecting him and being honest grew ever thinner. The more I tried to convince myself to focus on popcorn and dinosaurs, the deeper my unease burrowed into me. Half an hour later, I tucked Ethan into bed, the shadows in his room mellowed by the soft glow of his nightlight. "Good night, Mom," he whispered, his small hand reaching out for mine. "Good night, sweetie," I replied, my voice steady though my heart raced. I pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead, lingering for a moment more than I should have, feeling the warmth of his innocence. But the moment slipped away as I knew I had to leave. The park was within walking distance, and the night air was sharp against my skin. I wrapped my arms around myself, spiraling into dark thoughts as I approached my destination. Who was waiting for me? What could they possibly reveal? As I reached the park entrance, the faint sounds of the bustling city faded, replaced by rustling leaves and the distant croak of frogs. The moon cast a silver hue over the paths, and a single park bench caught my gaze. I swallowed hard as the figure emerged from the shadows. "Janet," a voice called softly, low enough to carry the weight of secrets. "Who are you?" I responded, anxiety pricking my skin. "I'm someone who knows Ethan," the man said, stepping into the light. A janitor's uniform clung to him, a stark contrast to the world I inhabited. His expression was serious, almost somber. "I've seen what happens at that school." I felt my heart race in my chest as I blinked at him, searching for answers. "What do you mean?" "Look, I know this is strange, but I've been cleaning those hallways for years. I see the kids, the way they are with each other. And I overheard something earlier this week. Something important about your son." He hesitated, gauging my reaction. "What? What did you hear?" My voice trembled, the feeling of dread threatening to overwhelm me. "Ethan is more than just a target. He's part of a bigger issue. The school. It has a culture that's almost toxic, you know? It's feeding off kids like him, sensitive kids from homes with too much pressure. They're setting him up." "Janet." The word struck me like a blow, shaking the very foundation of my resolve. "Setting him up? How?" He let out a breath, remorse etched on his face. "They're turning the bullying into a sport, something to bet on, to profit from. This isn't just about kids being mean anymore. It's darker than that." Stunned, I staggered backward, my mind whirred with an urgency to protect Ethan from this insidious reality. "You can't be serious. How would they profit from this? The school receives funding based on attendance and performance. But if they can incite chaos, make these kids fight back, it causes a cycle. They'll tighten their grips and manipulate it into big payouts." I could hardly breathe under the weight of what he was saying. "And Ethan? He's caught in the middle of it?" "I'm afraid so," he nodded gravely. "I didn't want to scare you, but I couldn't let this go on without saying something. You have to fight for him, Janet. Not just as a mother, but as a voice in that school." As he spoke, the reality of my position crashed around me. I felt small against the enormity of this fight, but I couldn't back down. I had to protect Ethan. "Thank you for telling me," I managed, though fear coursed through me like ice. "But if this is true, what do I do?" Document everything, he urged. Find out who else is involved in this. You're not alone. There are parents who feel as you do. And don't trust those in charge, they could be part of the problem. Then, as if his words had conjured a specter, a shadow lurked at the edge of the park, watching us intently. My blood ran cold as I turned to follow his gaze, but before I could react, the figure melted back into the darkness. What was that? I gasped, the impending sense of danger prickling at the back of my mind. Listen, you need to be careful, the janitor whispered urgently, eyes wide with concern. They won't let you get too close to the truth. You need to protect Ethan and yourself. My heart raced, adrenaline coursing through me as I realized the magnitude of the situation I had stumbled into. I will, I vowed, though the weight of uncertainty hung heavily around me. With one last grateful glance, I turned to leave but felt the familiar tug of fear drag me back. Wait, how do I contact you if? He gave me a sad smile, eyes glistening. You'll find me if you need me. Just look for the janitor in the shadows. We're all watching, Janet, as I navigated my way home. Dread filled my heart anew. The cozy apartment I had left just hours ago now felt like a false sanctuary, a fragile facade, against an overwhelming storm. Suddenly, the battle was far from over. It felt as if I'd just stepped into a war zone, and the stakes were higher than ever. I rushed into the apartment, ready to gather my thoughts, but Ethan's sleeping face reminded me that I was not just fighting for myself. I sank onto the couch, heart pounding, entangled in shadows of doubt. Would I be able to protect him from what loomed in the darkness? Then the soft vibration of my phone startled me again. I glanced down and my eyes widened as I realized who was on the other end. It was an unknown number, but the message was chilling. I know what you're uncovering. You need to stop. Or else. My breath caught in my throat. It was a direct threat, and the stakes had never been clearer. The message hung in the air like a suffocating fog, wrapping around me as I stared at the screamy heart pounding in rhythm with an overwhelming sense of dread. I felt I was teetering on the edge of a dark abyss, questioning how far I was willing to delve into this twisted reality for Ethan's sake. Hands trembling, I leaned back on the couch, trying to steady my racing thoughts and instincts telling me to run to hide. But hiding wasn't an option now. I had toys scattered around the living room, remnants of Ethan's beloved dinosaur world, matching figures of a reality safe from the cruel threats lurking in shadows. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to refocus. I couldn't show fear. I had to be brave for him. I crossed the room to Ethan's door, peeking in at his serene face, peaceful and oblivious to the nightmare encroaching on our lives. I silently cursed the world outside that could already color his innocence with shades of cruelty, as if sensing my turmoil. He stirred slightly, mumbling a faint dream about T-Rexes and adventure. A small flicker of warmth ignited within me. It reminded me of my singular purpose. I'd fight for this happiness, no matter the cost. I returned to the living room steadfast. I had to gather intel, discover the connections, and awaken parents who were oblivious to what was sinking deeper in the school's foundation. I knew the janitor had stated I wasn't alone, but willing allies were hard to come by, especially when the world seemed to conspire against the vulnerable. A sudden knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. My heart leaped into my throat as I cautiously edged toward it, a hint of concern and caution washing over me. Could it be someone from the school? A messenger? My mind swirled as I peered through the peephole. A familiar face greeted me, a hesitant Sarah, one of Ethan's classmates' mothers. Her usual vibrant confidence was replaced by a somberness that made my heart sink. I opened the door slightly, maintaining a wary stance. "Hey Janet," she whispered, glancing down the corridor as if afraid someone might overhear. "Can I come in?" "Of course," I replied, curious yet wary, ushering her in. "Is everything okay?" She closed the door quietly and leaned against it, her shoulders drooping with some unseen heaviness. "I wanted to talk about something I overheard at the parent-teacher meeting last week. It's been weighing on my mind." A chill shot through me. "What is it, Sarah?" With her eyes darting around, she hesitated, then took a breath, ready to divulge her secrets. "I've noticed some strange things going on. The kids have been more aggressive at school lately, and it seems like everyone is in on a joke except us, the parents. They seem to treat it lightly." But she stopped, her voice trembling. "But what?" I pressed, the urgency of the moment reshaping the air around us. "What if it's not just kids being kids? What if there's more to it?" What if she faltered again, clearly struggling with her words? What if it's intentional? My breath hitched. Unknowingly, Sarah was adding layers to a discovery that paralyzed my thoughts. You think it could be related to the dynamics in the school? I don't know, she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. But I overheard some of the teachers betting on school events like games, more like watching fights break out among the kids. Felt sick. I felt sick that I felt my heart clench at her revelation. The strings of my resilience straining. I had to comprehend what lay beneath the surface, faint echoes of collusion and complacency stitched in from the shadows. You have to tell more parents. We need number strength, that I know, she whispered, voice breaking. But what if they don't believe us? An idea sparked within me, a flicker of hope amid the darkness. We build a network, I suggested urgently, instinctively leaning toward her. We can document everything, start small but gather proof. We can speak to others who feel the way we do. We can't leave them unaware. A small gasp broke free from her lips, the light of possibility igniting her gaze. You're right. If we band together, her voice trailed off, but I could see she was starting to understand the urgency. We exchanged thoughts, more resolute as each word passed. The storm was intense, but standing together brought warmth, a fleeting notion that there was hope. As we plotted, we began gathering snapshots of the children's experiences, stories, whispered fears, and unspoken traumas. Each moment we shared fortified our bond, a sacred alliance built on faith and anguish. Suddenly, the soft sound of footsteps grew louder in the hallway, and my breath caught again. I shot Sarah a questioning glance. Do you hear that? Before she could respond, there was another knock on the door, followed by a stern voice. Janet, open up. We know you're in there. Panic surged through me, adrenaline flooding my senses. My mind raced as I recognized that voice. It belonged to the principal, a harbinger of authority that now felt like a dark omen of truth. Janet, this is your last chance. We need to discuss Ethan. My heart sank, fear knotting in my chest. This was it. I was being drawn into a trap, a collision with the very system I sought to dismantle. Without hesitation, I turned to Sarah, sense of urgency coursing through me. Hide. She slipped into a closet, breathless and wide-eyed. I approached the door slowly, reluctantly, ready to confront whatever awaited me on the other side. Knowing that this was only the beginning of an uncharted struggle for my son, with a trembling hand, I reached for the doorknob, wondering if I was prepared to confront the dangers unfolding in front of me, as shadows of what I might lose ideas danced fearfully in the back of my mind, all while betrayal threatened to choke me once more. The door creaked as I opened it, revealing the imposing figure of Principal Harris standing on my doorstep. Shadows loomed behind him, a collection of teachers watching with eyes tinged with something darker, disapproval, perhaps disdain. Anxiety tightened around my chest as his gaze bore into me, a calculated mask of authority masking what I suspected lay beneath. Janet, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, it seems we need to have a serious talk about Ethan's behavior lately. I resisted the urge to slam the door and silence the tension rising between us. I'm not sure I'm comfortable discussing my son's behavior in front of. I gestured towards the teachers hovering nearby, unwilling to give them a more sordid role in this unfolding saga. That is precisely the issue, he interjected, raising a brow in challenge. You need to understand, as his mother, that it is your responsibility to ensure Ethan fits within our behavioral expectations at school. Otherwise, there will be consequences. A chill shot through me. What consequences? I demanded, my voice shaky yet steadfast. Are you threatening my son? Or are you just acting as a pawn in a game I refuse to participate in? The teachers behind him exchanged wary glances. I could feel the weight of judgment pressing down upon me, their condemnation almost palpable. Ethan is not the only one being disruptive, you know, he replied, his tone rising slightly. His attitude is infectious if left unchecked. It could poison the entire class. The other children require stability. At that moment, I saw Sarah's frightened face peeking from the closet's small crack. What would happen if they found her here? The stakes escalated, and I felt myself teetering on the brink of something untenable. I straightened, driven not just by fear but a fierce determination. You think I'm worried about his attitude? I'm worried about his safety. Kids shouldn't be subjected to whatever games you're playing here. I have heard troubling things about the environment at this school, and I won't stand for it. Principal Harris' expression hardened, and I caught a flicker of alarm in his eyes before he masked it again. Watch your tone, Janet. Accusations against school staff can have serious repercussions. We pride ourselves on maintaining a secure environment for all our students. Secure? I scoffed, the indignation rising within me like molten lava. You're failing these kids right now. You're complicit in a culture of silence and fear, and I won't be part of it. I will bring this to light. His lips twisted into a taunting smile. You think a handful of parents can change the system? You are risking more than you know. The school board is not as forgiving as I am, and if you continue down this path, it could jeopardize Ethan's educational future. A wave of desperation washed over me. How could he threaten my son like this? But something deeper pulled at my gut, nagging at me. Was this not only about Ethan but about all the kids? Yes, I countered, but think about it. If you truly care about the student body as you claim, then why wouldn't you welcome transparency? Why wouldn't you support us in addressing this? He took a step back, the facade slipping for just a moment, revealing something darker in its place, a hint of fear that perhaps I was right, that perhaps change was in the air. But it was only for an instant, and it hardened again under the weight of authority as he cleared his throat. Enough, he declared, raising his hands as if to banish my words into nothingness. If you wish to pursue this ridiculous behavior of yours, I suggest you tread lightly. Our lawyers are quite efficient. Lawyers? I echoed, my voice shaking. You think I am afraid of lawyers? Protecting my son's dignity means more to me than any threat you can cower me with. You've wedged me into a corner where I must fight for what's right. For not only Ethan but for all the children trapped under this twisted hierarchy. As I spoke, behind me, Sarah emerged from her hiding spot, her face etched with fear and anger, foolhardiness glittering in her eyes. We're not afraid, she said, stepping beside me, her voice echoing my own. We're going to do something about this. The principal's eyes widened, flaring with indignation as I caught hold of Sarah's hand, uniting our resolve. You can try to intimidate us, but know that we're building a coalition. Parents who won't back down, kids who won't be silenced. There will be accountability. The air thickened with tension, and the group before us shifted uneasily as Principal Harris mouth formed a line, his face a mask of irritation and disbelief. This is your final warning, Janet, he said, voice cold. Stay out of matters beyond your comprehension, or you may regret it. Both you and your son. With a futile step backward, I absorbed his warning, but a surge of purpose flooded my veins. Regret? No. That's what I refuse to be a part of anymore. You have underestimated the power of frightened parents who find their strength together. The principal turned to leave, signaling to the teachers to follow him, but he paused one last time. The school is looking through a different lens now, Janet. And don't say I didn't warn you. As the door closed, leaving a heavy silence in its wake, I felt Sarah trembling beside me. I turned to her, overwhelmed to see the fear mingled with a newfound anger reflected in her eyes. Are you okay? I asked softly. She took a deep breath. No, not really. But I'm ready to do this. Together we'll find a way. Just then, a faint scraping sound drew my attention, followed by muffled laughter echoing outside my window. Ethan's friends playing, ignorant of the storm brewing inside their school. For a fleeting moment, that innocent joy was a balm to the tension spiraling around us. But before I could express my gratitude for such a small slice of joy, my phone buzzed violently on the table. Startled, I flinched and reached for it. As I read the message that flashed across the screen, the warmth dissolved, replaced by a cold wave of unease. It was from a number I didn't recognize. They know about your plans. You need to protect Ethan. They might come for him next. The room spun as the reality of what I had set in motion settled around me, and the growing shadows whispered threats previously unspoken. I clutched the phone, my heart racing as I glanced at Sarah. What does this mean? I whispered, already fearing the answer. I had begun a war, and while there was no turning back now, the true fight had only just begun. The air felt thick with anxiety, as if the walls of my own home had turned into prison bars. Sarah's fingers entwined with mine, a lifeline amid the chaos. The message hovered ominously in my mind, its implications spiraling into 1,000 scenarios, each more concerning than the last. We have to move quickly, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. They're watching us. What do we do? She asked, her eyes wide with both fear and determination. I could sense the strength blooming within her. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it might not be enough. I glanced outside, where Ethan and his friends were still oblivious to the storm. A part of me wanted to shield him from the world, to pull him into my embrace and hide away from everything threatening to shatter our fragile peace. But the reality was stark. Hiding wouldn't solve anything. We need allies, I said, growing firmer as the idea solidified in my mind. We can't face this fight alone. There are other parents who feel the same way, who want to protect their kids. If we form a group, we might be able to bring these issues to light. Sarah nodded, a spark in her eyes, but I could see the tension in her brows. What if they retaliate? She took a breath, steadying herself. What if they go after Ethan? I squeezed her hand, wanting to give reassurances I didn't entirely believe. Well, be careful. But we can't let that stop us. If we're going to change things, we have to take calculated risks. It's the only way. Suddenly, the sound of delighted laughter from outside faded into an unsettling silence, replaced by the heavy thump of footsteps approaching our door. My stomach dropped, and I exchanged a worried glance with Sarah. The doorbell rang, sending a jolt through my chest. I moved cautiously to the door, steeling my nerves. Who is it? I called, my heart drumming loudly in my ears. It's Mr. Jenkins, the janitor. May I come in? Never had I imagined the school janitor would be someone receiving such an invitation, yet his voice carried an urgency that pried open the door just enough for me to catch a glimpse. A tall man with tired eyes and a weary smile stood there. His grime-streaked overalls a bizarre contrast against the pristine facade of education that had just threatened to bury my family. Mr. Jenkins, I said hesitantly. What's going on? I've got something important to discuss, he said, his gaze darting nervously toward the road before he stepped inside when I opened the door further. As I closed the door behind him and gestured for him to sit, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of confusion and incredulity. Why would a janitor have anything pertinent about the situation at school? First, I want you to know that I'm on your side, he said, leaning forward, his voice a low murmur that held an undercurrent of urgency. What you're doing, it might cause some ripples, but I've seen enough in my years working at that school to know things are worse than they seem. What do you mean? I asked, my heart racing as I tried to piece together his cryptic words. He took a breath, the weight of years etched in the lines of his face. There are a lot of things happening behind the scenes. The principal? He's not the only one you should be worried about. There are whispers of changes going through the school board, stuff that could set off a chain reaction and not in the way parents would hope. Like what? I pressed, suddenly filled with a desperate hope that he was about to illuminate the darkness looming over us. Disciplinary measures that aren't just about misbehavior, they could affect reputation, financial cuts to programs, and even future admissions. They're worried about the image they present, he said, his voice thickening with emotion. And it'll dovetail into how they treat students deemed problematic. Ethan. My heart dropped, the fears I had tried to shield myself from crashing back in force. What happens if they decide he needs to be removed? Mr. Jenkins' face hardened, and he shrugged his shoulders. That's the danger, ma'am. Kids who stand out, who challenge the norm, often end up being scapegoated. It's not just about discipline anymore. It's about control. And they won't tolerate threats to that control. Especially from parents. Why mine churned with overwhelming dread. They're willing to harm children to maintain power. That's how these kinds of things go, he replied, grim resolution creeping into his tone. And I know you want to protect him, so you have to act carefully. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again and I quickly glanced at the screen. Another ominous message, a screenshot of someone's social media post I didn't recognize. It showed a photo of Ethan at school, captioned "Troublemaker's kid, wonder how long before he gets kicked out." Panic washed over me, and I turned to Mr. Jenkins, fear gripping my heart. What can we do? He leaned in closer, his voice a barely audible whisper. Rally the other parents. They need to know what's at stake. But approach them cautiously. This isn't just about saving a single child anymore. It's about fighting for every kid like Ethan who's labeled as different. I nodded, understanding dawning deep within me like a flickering flame slowly igniting. We can start a meeting, I said, urgency tightening my words. If we band together, yes, but be discreet, he cautioned. And keep Ethan close, don't let him sense the gravity yet. You'll need him to remain grounded, to not perceive the threat. Children are resilient. They can overcome, but they shouldn't have to. As he stood to leave, I felt the weight of my gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I had no idea. Ihe's hand raised, cutting off my words. Do what you have to do for him. Stand your ground, but don't forget what it is you're fighting for. Just before he departed, he paused at the door and turned back toward me, his face serious. And Janet, if they come after you, reach out to me. You're not alone in this. Once he left, I stood there, absorbing his last words. The gravity of the situation wrapped around me like a heavy cloak. The shadows felt more ominous now, the stakes higher. Yet, despite the overwhelming challenges ahead, a quiet ember flickered within me. We were going to fight not just for Ethan, but for every child whose voice was silenced in this oppressive system. But as I prepared to take the first step in creating a coalition, the relief I felt clashed sharply with the gnawing anxiety over the threats we were facing. My heart raced wildly again when I heard a faint rustling sound coming from Ethan's room. I turned, realizing I had lost track of time. I rushed towards his door, my stomach sinking as I opened it. Ethan stood by the window, his innocent eyes wide as he stared out into the world. "Mom, can I have a sleepover?" he asked, completely unaware of the battles shaping around him. The simplicity of his request cut through me like a knife, reminding me of the innocence at stake. "Sure, honey. I need to talk to you about something." But as I spoke, the buzz of my phone vibrated again, and when I looked down, a new message appeared, sending a cold shiver through my veins. "You're being watched. Brace yourself." In that moment, I realized not only the reality of the threat looming over my son, but also that we were on the precipice of a fight much larger than ourselves. Standing there, my heart pounded in my chest, because despite the hope coursing through me, the shadows were growing darker by the second. The weight of the last message lingered in the air, pressing down on my chest like a leaden shroud. I felt the walls of our home closing in, my sanctuary transforming into a battleground for our future. Outside, the sun cast long shadows on the ground, and inside I stood paralyzed, grappling with the enormity of our situation. "Mom?" Ethan's voice broke through my thoughts, innocent and confused. His eyes searched my face for answers that I didn't have yet, and I felt the sting of tears threatening to spill. I had wanted his teenage years to be filled with carefree moments, but now I stood on the edge of a storm I hadn't prepared him for. "Just sit down for a moment, okay?" I said, my voice shaky as I motioned for him to join me on the bed. He complied, but the worry etched across his brow deepened the heaviness in my heart. "Is something wrong?" he asked, concern bubbling beneath the surface of his youthful curiosity. My mind raced, struggling to figure out how to shield him from the harsh truths while still preparing him for the battle that lay ahead. "No, sweetheart. Not wrong per se." I forced a smile, wishing desperately to project calmness he could cling to. "It's just that there are some things happening at school that we need to be aware of, okay? You know how sometimes kids can be complicated." He nodded slowly, the weight of understanding dawning on him. "I want you to promise me something, Ethan. If you ever feel uncomfortable or if something bothers you, you come to me immediately. Can we do that?" "Of course, Mom. I always tell you," he replied, his demeanor lightening a bit, but a shadow still lingered in his eyes. "I just want to keep you safe," I added, unable to shake off the urgency that lay in my words. He deserved to feel secure, to not carry the burdens that threatened to twist his childhood into something stressful and fearful. I clenched my fists, my resolve hardening. Ethan brightened a bit before shifting his weight. "So about that sleepover?" A momentary laugh escaped my lips, a brief respite from the storm inside. "Okay, well, talk to your friend's parents. Just make sure you keep it low-key, alright? Maybe have it here?" I suggested, the thought of laughter piercing through our tension. His face lit up, momentarily pulling me out of the shadows. "Yes. I'll text James and Carter right now." He jumped up and darted to grab his phone. While he rushed out of the room, I took a deep breath and sank back onto the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, a reminder of the undercurrent lurking just beneath the surface. Unthinkingly, I pulled it out, my heart racing as I did. A single message blinked on the screen, a stark reminder that the stakes were higher than I was ready to confront. "You're not safe. Be careful who you trust." I stared at the text, my pulse quickening. I noticed the slight tremor in my hands and forced myself to breathe slowly, reminding myself of Mr. Jenkins' earlier words. "Stand your ground, but don't forget what it is you're fighting for." In that moment, Sarah walked in, her face drawn and weary, worry lines etched deep in her brow. "How's it going?" she asked, attempting to inject normalcy into the chaos swirling around us. Ethan's excitement poured into the room as he bounded back. "I'm having a sleepover." "Mom said yes," he announced. For a split second I saw the warmth of childhood flicker back in his eyes. "That's great," Sarah exclaimed, wrapping her arms around Ethan, who seemed to dissolve into her embrace. Her smile, although sincere, masked the anxiety pulsating just beneath the surface. Yet we both felt the cracks forming, the undercurrents of fear threatening to wash over the moments we desperately wanted to preserve. I glanced at Sarah, and the unspoken words between us were suffocating. We had to keep him safe, but how? As the night fell, shadows took on a life of their own. Ethan's temporary joy enveloped the atmosphere, each laugh echoing off the walls like fragile glass, beautiful but easily shattered. As I prepped the snacks for the sleepover, my mind turned back to the serious talk with Mr. Jenkins. The idea of gathering concerned parents swirled in my head. But who could I trust? The realization gripped my heart. What if there were spies within our community, a la the whispers that had already seeped into our lives? By the time Ethan's friends arrived, I had partly convinced myself that I was being paranoid. Each jubilant shout that filled our home brought a semblance of warmth, a safety that made me forget, even momentarily hours later, as the boys settled on the living room floor, clustering around their video games, a sudden knock echoed through the house, jolting me from my temporary reprieve. The excitement of the evening fell silent as I shot a glance toward Sarah. "Who could that be?" she asked, her brows knitted together in concern. "I'll check," I replied, though deep down, a surge of fear enveloped me. What if it were more threats? As I approached the door, my heart raced, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. When I swung the door open, my breath hitched in my throat. Standing there, bathed in the dim porch light, was Vanessa, a fellow parent I'd always considered amicable. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resolve as she whispered, "You won't believe what I just heard. They have a plan and you need to hear it now." The words hung heavy in the air, foreboding and ominous. In that moment, as I stood there, shocked by the unexpected urgency of her message, I felt the world shift beneath my feet yet again. Hope mingled with dread, the line between safety and danger blurring fast. We were on the brink of an awakening, with darkness looming ominously just a step behind. The air in the room felt electric, charged with tension as Vanessa stepped in and closed the door behind her. Ethan and his friends continued laughing, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing outside. I felt a pang of guilt for allowing them to revel in their innocence, knowing all too well how fragile a sanctuary could be. "What's going on, Vanessa?" I whispered urgently, glancing back towards the living room to ensure the boys remained occupied. She quickly glanced back, as though afraid someone might overhear. "You know how we've all been feeling something's off at the school? I think it's even worse than we imagined. Some parents received an anonymous tip about forced transfers and disciplinary measures targeting students who've been deemed disruptive. They're using it as a means of control, especially against kids like Ethan." My breath caught in my throat. "Forced transfers? You mean they're planning to kick children out without warning?" Her face hardened, and the urgency was palpable in her voice. "Yes, and the kids who don't fit into their ideal mold, they're the ones that might be affected the most. Ethically, they're crossing a line. And it's getting closer to becoming a scandal if enough parents unite." Each word felt like a weight added to my already heavy chest. "But what can we do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "They've already threatened me, and I can't bear to think about what that will mean for Ethan." Vanessa stepped closer, her expression softening. "We need to organize, Janet. Gather the other parents, document what we've seen, what our kids have been through. The more support we show, the harder it will be for them to push us around. But who can we trust?" I whispered, knowing the shadows of fear lay thick across our lives. What if they end up getting to us before we even start? Her eyes locked onto mine, filled with quiet resolve. "If we keep it between us for now, it can give us time to strategize. The more we share this information, collecting testimonies about school experiences, the more we can expose their actions and rally for change. This isn't just about Ethan. It's about ensuring no other child goes through this again." I felt the ember of determination ignite within me again. "Okay, I'll reach out to the parents I know we can trust, the ones who've shown that they care about our kids' well-being. But we have to be cautious." Vanessa nodded as she pulled out her phone, scrolling for names. I'll do the same. This urgency is real, Janet. We cannot lose our children in the process of keeping quiet. As our conversation deepened, Ethan and his friends finally broke through, running back to the kitchen after their game. "What are you girls talking about?" Ethan asked with innocent eyes, momentarily pulling me away from the gravity of our discussion. That I knelt beside him, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. "Just some adult stuff, honey. Why don't you and your friends have some snacks while we finish?" His eyes sparkled with mischief as he turned back to his buddies. "Come on, guys. Let's go." And just like that, the momentary tension faded, giving way to laughter and the carefree sounds of youth I longed for him to enjoy. But I remained aware of the reality creeping in around us, knowing our little protective bubble was increasingly fragile. I exchanged one last worried glance with Vanessa before she slipped out, promising to keep me updated as the night deepened. I tried to remain engaged with the boys, but each laughter echoed hollowly in my ears. My heart was heavy, the weight of our impending fight settling uneasily upon my shoulders. Eventually, the boys grew sleepy, chaos settling down into semi-peaceful murmurs that night. As I lay beside Ethan while he drifted off to sleep, I felt an overwhelming mix of love and fear wash over me. I was standing between my child and a world ready to consume those who dared to stand out. Protecting him was turning into something monumental, and despite the love that filled my heart, a part of me trembled at the thought of the battle ahead. The weight of responsibility lay squarely on my shoulders, intensifying my resolve. I would gather support. I would protect him from the darkness threatening to swallow him whole. And with that determination flaring within me, I also acknowledged the fragile innocence that had become my beacon in all of this chaos. I gently brushed my fingers over Ethan's hair, fighting back the waves of fear that threatened to drown my spirit. Morning light crept through our curtains when I heard the sharp ping of messages starting anew, tales of anger, whispered conversations, and unnatural alliances forming among the parents determined to protect their children at all costs. I could barely breathe. The energy in that group chat pulsated with both fear and empowerment. But just when I thought I'd gathered my strength, another message cut through the noisiest. Screenshot from an unknown sender. A picture of Ethan from school with the caption, "This is what happens when kids like him run wild. It won't end well." I felt my heart plummet to my stomach, suffocated by the threat cloaked in that innocent photo. Panic clawed at my chest, but I forced myself to regain my composure. This was not just about Ethan anymore. It was bigger than any one child. I had begun to rally the other parents, recognizing that each moment spent in silence made us more vulnerable, and hiding would only amplify the threat against my son. As the sunlight streamed through the window, a dawning sense of urgency enveloped me, propelling me forward. I executed a plan that had been birthing in my mind. I would protect him from the school, from the darkness closing in, and from the loss of his very spirit. Just as I was about to dive back into the chorus of chaos surrounding my phone, I glanced over at Ethan, who had stirred slightly. I whispered, "No matter what comes our way, kiddo, I'll always fight for you." Even in slumber, I felt the warmth of his spirit brushing against my heart, reminding me of the vast reservoir of strength holding us together in this turbulent sea. Ready or not, we were going to breach the surface of this trial and emerge into the light, every moment pulling us closer to the confrontation that awaited. The final showdown was coming, and I wanted Ethan to emerge unscathed through it all. That morning, a flicker of hope ignited within me, a sensation I hadn't felt in too long, surging with the promise that we would stand united and resilient. And with that thought, I prepared to face whatever lay ahead, strengthened by love and a mother's unwavering resolve. I stepped out of the room ready to begin our fight, aware that the next steps could change everything for Ethan, for me, and for all the children and families caught in the snare of fear and lies. "I've got you," I murmured softly, the promise echoing in the corridors of my heart, spiraling outwards toward the infinite possibility of love conquering darkness.